As we have previously discussed, Mount Sterling had exchanged hands several times during the Civil War. Eastern Kentucky refugees who were driven from their homes by guerrillas and rebel forces would come to Mount Sterling for safety. General Stephen Burbridge and Captain Edward Barlow would come against Brigadier General John Hunt Morgan and Colonel R.M. Martin and Colonel H.L. Glinter on June 8th and 9th of 1864. Come along with us as we take a look at what happened during what was considered to be the bloodiest battle for Mount Sterling, Kentucky. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. Please do not attempt to remove the safety bar while the ride is in motion. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The travels of General John Hunt Morgan. Brigadier General Morgan is famous for his raids extending from Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. He also fought in Tennessee at the Battle of Shiloh. Most of the battles that he would be involved in would be considered more raids and skirmishes than actual battles, as he would follow the Union Army and pick off soldiers as the army would advance, or would fight against the army only to leave once the skirmish was won. On June 1st, 1864, John Hunt Morgan would lead his men against a small Union detachment from Pound Gap. They would use the Pound Gap as a way to gain access to central Kentucky and then as an escape route. Morgan and his raiders would humiliate the Union soldiers that had set up camp at the base of Pine Mountain. For more information about Morgan and the Pound Gap, please see our video on the battles of the Pound Gap, Virginia. On June 2, 1864, Morgan had a force consisting of 1,400 men on horseback and another 800 men who were traveling by foot. Morgan and his men left the Pound Gap area and traveled along the Mount Sterling Road by way of Troublesome Creek. On June 8, 1864, Hunt and his men arrived outside of Mount Sterling through the dark fields along the way of Camargo Road, which is now Route 460. The first attack. There were two Federal camps at Mount Sterling. At the first sign of daylight on June 8, 1864, General Morgan ordered his men to attack the first and smaller of the camps, which was guarding a vital supply depot at Mount Sterling. The battle was quickly over, as the smaller camp was overwhelmed by the superior numbers of the Confederate forces. 75 men were captured in the first skirmish. Morgan's men then moved on to the second camp, which was commanded by Captain Edward Barlow and located on the left side of Camargo Road. In this skirmish, Captain Barlow and an estimated 300 troops were captured, as well as a large supply of military and medical stores. Morgan's men went house to house, clearing out Union sympathizers and troops from the town. The remainder of the Federal troops were driven back to Mount Sterling. Morgan left Colonel H.L. Glinter and his men in charge of the captured area, and then he moved west with the 2nd Brigade. In all, there was an estimated 380 prisoners and materials captured by Morgan and his men. The home of J.O. Miller was broken into, and Miller, who was a bank cashier, was forced to take his key to the bank vault, where an estimated $59,000 to $62,000 was taken from the farmer's bank. This money was never recovered. However, Morgan would have to answer for the robbery. The second attack. Morgan's men were busy sacking Mount Sterling and did not notice what was coming toward them. Federal General Stephen G. Burbridge was quietly moving his 2,500 troops into position for battle. Burbridge had been encamped 90 miles away at Beaver Creek. They had made an extraordinary trip to bridge the difference in just 30 hours. Even though Burbridge's troops had reached Mount Sterling on the evening of the 8th, Burbridge ordered his men to remain hidden and rest. At 4 a.m. in the morning of June 9, 1864, Burbridge ordered the 45th Kentucky Mounted Infantry under his command to attack the Confederate forces camping along the Camargo Pike under the command of Colonel R.M. Martin. Using the same tactics that Morgan had used the day before, Burbridge's men were able to quickly defeat the sleeping men of Martin's camp. Hearing the sounds of battle, Colonel H.L. Glinter brought his forces from the Levee Road to support Martin's troops. However, the forces of Burbridge overwhelmed the two combined forces and drove them back through the city. The Confederates did try to mount a counterattack against the Federal forces, but were overcome, and there were losses on both sides from the effort. The official number of losses for the Federal side does vary, even though it is considered and widely accepted to be the bloodiest battle for Mount Sterling. Most sources would state that there were a large number of casualties. Those numbers would include at least 8 to 35 Union soldiers killed and an additional 150 wounded, depending upon the source. All of the sources do agree that 52 Confederate soldiers were killed, and 120 were wounded, and 150 were taken prisoner. After this battle, there were skirmishes and fighting still going on sporadically throughout Montgomery County, Kentucky. However, in the end, the Federal forces were able to take Mount Sterling as a victory. John Hunt Morgan and the Battle of Cynthiana, Kentucky. Morgan would leave Mount Sterling and travel 37.5 miles to Cynthiana, Kentucky on the night of the 8th. It is not known if he knew that the troops that he had left behind in Mount Sterling had been defeated and captured. Against an inferior force, Morgan won a minor battle on June 10, 1864, at the Battle of Keller's Bridge on Licking River near Cynthiana. Known as the Second Battle of Cynthiana, on June 11, 1864, Morgan led his troops into battle once more. Feeling confident from his victory the day before, unknowingly, Morgan chose to face a much superior Union mounted force. This led to a disaster, as Morgan's forces as a cohesive unit were decimated. Only a few escaped with their lives, including Morgan and a few of his officers. Bank robbery and death of John Hunt Morgan. As we have stated, during the June 8, 1864 raid, the Farmers' Bank in Mount Sterling, Kentucky was robbed. The amount of money is in dispute, as some sources saying the amount was $59,000, while other sources state that the amount was closer to $62,000. Morgan was accused of masterminding the robbery. While it is suspected that some of his men might have been involved, it is now thought that Morgan had nothing to do with the event. However, he was charged with criminal banditry and removed from his command. While working to clear his name from the robbery, Morgan and his men were encamped near Greenville, Tennessee. On the morning of September 4, 1864, Union troops attacked. While trying to retreat with his men from the area, Morgan was shot in the back by a Union cavalryman. Morgan died from this injury. He is buried in Lexington, Kentucky. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Civil War battles. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.